Hello and welcome to our channel The Underscore Metaphor, and we are in the series of book reading, and I am presenting The Power of Now, a guide to spiritual enlightenment. Okay, and now in the previous video we have talked about the chapter 4, and today I'm going to read the chapter 5, The State of Presence. Before continuing this video, I'd like to make a request to all the audience. If you like this content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It will be so much motivations and inspirations for me because I'm the new in the field of YouTube. So let's begin chapter 5, The State of Presence. It's not what you think it is. You keep talking about the state of presence is the key. I think I understand it intellectually, but I don't know if I have ever experienced it. I wonder, is it what I think it is, or is it something entirely different? It is not what you think it is. You can't think about presence and the mind cannot understand it. Understanding presence is being present. Try a little experiment. Close your eyes and say to yourself, I wonder what my next thought is going to be. Then become very alert and wait for the next thought. Be like a cat watching a mouse hole. What thought is going in to come out of the mouse hole? Try it now. Well, I had to wait for quite a long time before a thought came in. Exactly. As long as you are in the state of intense presence, you are free of thought. You are still yet highly alert. The instant your conscious attention sinks below a certain level, thought rises in. The mental noise returns. The stillness is lost. You are back in time. To test their degree of presence, some Zen masters have been known to creep up on their students from behind and suddenly hit them with a stick, quite a shock. If a student had not fully present and in a state of alertness, if he had kept his loin girded and his lamp burning, which is one of the analogies that Jesus uses for the presence, he would have noticed the master coming up from behind and stopped him or stepped aside. But if he were hit, that would mean he has immersed in thought, which is to say absent, unconscious. To stay present in everyday life, it has to deeply rooted within yourself. Otherwise, the mind, which has incredible momentum, will drive you like a wild river. What do you mean by rooted within yourself? It means to inhabit your body fully, to always have some of your attention in the inner energy field of your body, to feel the body from within you, so to speak. Body awareness keeps you present, it anchors you in the now. See chapter 6. The historic meaning of waiting. In a sense, the state of presence could be compared to waiting. Jesus used the analogy of waiting in some of his parables. This is not the usual bored or restless kind of waiting that is denial of the present that I spoke about already. It is not a waiting in which your attention is focused on some point in the future and the present is perceived as undesirable object that prevents you from having what you want. This is qualitatively different kind of waiting, one that requires your total alertness. Something could happen at any moment, and if you are not absolutely awake, absolutely still, absolutely still, you will miss. This is the kind of waiting that this is talks about. In that state, all your attention is in the now. There is no left life for daydreaming, thinking, remembering, anticipating. There is no tension in it, no fear, just alert presence. You are the present with your whole being, with every cell of your body in this state. The you that has the past and the future, the personality, if you like, is hardly there anymore, and yet nothing of the value is lost. You are still essentially yourself. In fact, you are more fully yourself than you ever were before, or rather, it is only now that you are truly yourself. Be like a servant waiting for the return of a master, says Jesus. The servant doesn't know at what hour the master is going to come, so he stays is awake, alert, poised, still lest he miss master arrivals. In the another parable, Jesus speaks of the five careless, unconscious women who do not have enough world consciousness to keep their lamps burning, stay present, and so miss the bridegroom, the now, and don't get to waiting for enlightenment. This five stands in the contrast to the five wise women who have enough world, stay conscious. Even the man who wrote the Gospel did not understand the meaning of these parables. So the first interpretations and distortions creep in as they were hidden down. With the subsequent erroneous interpretation, the real meaning was completely lost. These are parables not about the end of the world, but about the end of psychological time. That point to transcendence of the egoic mind and the possibility of living in an entirely new state of consciousness. Beauty arises in the stillness of your presence. What you have just described is something that I occasionally experience at a brief moment when I am alone and surrounded by nature. Yes, Zen masters use the word satori to describe a place of insight, a moment of no mind and total presence. Although satori is not a lasting transformation, be grateful when it comes for you, for it gives you a taste of enlightenment. You may indeed have experienced this many times without knowing what it is and realizing its important presence is needed to become aware of beauty, the majesty, the scarness of nature. Have you ever gazed up into infinity of space on a clear night, and struck by the absolute stillness and inconceivable vastness of it? Have you truly listened to the sound of movement, mountains, rain in the forest, or to sing a song of the backwater and the dogs on the white summer's evening? Too becomes aware of such things. The mind needs to be still, and you have to put down for the moment your personal baggage of the problems of the past, refuses as well as all your knowledge. Otherwise, you will see what not see here, but not here. Your total presence is required. Beyond the beauty of extreme forms, there is more here, some things that cannot be named, something ineffable, some the inner holy sense. Whenever and wherever there is the beauty, this inner sense, assigned through somehow, it only reveals itself to you when you are present. Could it be that the nameless sense and your presence are one and the same? Would it be there without your presence? Go deeply into it, find out for yourself. When you experience those moments of presence, you likely didn't realize that you were briefly in the state of no mind. This is because the gap between that state and the influx of thought was too narrow. Your satori may only have lasted for a few seconds before the minds came in, but it was there, otherwise you could never have experienced the beauty. Mind can neither recognize nor create beauty only for a few seconds while you were completely present towards the beauty or that scarness there because of narrowness of the gap and the lack of resilience and the alertness on your part. You were probably unable to see the fundamental difference between perception, the thoughtless awareness of beauty, and the aiming and interpreting of it as thought. The time gap was so small that it seemed to be a single process. The truth is, however, that the moment thought came in, all you had was the memory of it. The wider the time gap between perception and the thought, the more that there is to you as a human being, which is to say, the more conscious you are. Many people are so imprisoned in their mind that the beauty of nature does not really exist for them. They might say, "What a pretty flower," but that's just a mechanical mental leveling because they are not still not present. They don't truly see the flower, don't feel its essence, its holiness, just as they don't know themselves, don't feel their own essence, their own holiness. Because we live in a such mind dominant culture, much modern art, architecture, music, and literature, and devoid of beauty of the inner sense, with a very few exceptions. The reasons that the people who create those things cannot even for a moment free themselves from their mind, so they are never in touch with that place within her true creativity and the beauty arise. The mind left to itself creates a mono moisturize and not only in the art galleries. Look at our urban landscapes and industrial wastelands. No civilization has ever produced so much ugliness. Realizing pure consciousness. Is presence the same as being? When you become conscious of being, what is really happening is that beings becomes conscious of itself. When the beings becomes conscious of itself as a presence, beings consciousness and the life are synonyms. We could say that the presence only presence means consciousness becoming the conscious of itself or the life attaining self consciousness, but don't get attached to the words and don't make an effort to understand this. This is nothing that you need to understand before you can become present. I do understand what you just said, but it seems to apply that being the ultimate transcendental reality is not yet complete. That is undergoing a process of development. Does God need time for personal growth? Yes, but only as a scene from the limited perception of the manifested universe. In the Bible, God declares, I am the Alpha and Omega, and I am the living one. In the timeless dream where the God dwells, which is also your home, the beginning and the end, the Alpha and Omega are one, and the essence of everything that has ever been and ever will be is internally present in an unmanifested state of oneness and perfection, totally beyond anything the human mind can ever imagine or comprehend. In our world of seemingly separate forms, however, timeless perfection is an inconceivable concept. Here, even consciousness, which is light emanating from the eternal source, seems to be subject to a process of development, but this is due to our limited perception. It is not so in absolute terms. Nevertheless, let me continue to speak for the moment about the evolutions of consciousness in the world. Everything that exists has a being, has a God essence, has some degree of consciousness. Even a stone has rudimentary consciousness, otherwise it would not be, and its atoms and molecules would disperse. Everything is alive. The sun, the earth, plants, animals, humans, all are expression of consciousness in varying degree. Consciousness manifesting as a form. The all arises when consciousness takes on shape and forms, thought forms, and materials forms. Look at the millions of life forms on this planet alone, in the sea, on the land, in the air, and then each life forms in the replicated millions of times to what end? Is someone or something playing a game with farms? This is what the ancient seers of India asked themselves. They saw the world as the Leela, a kind of divine game that cards playing. The individual life forms are absolutely not very important in this game. In the sea, the most life forms don't survive for more than a few minutes after being born. The human form turns to the dust pretty quickly too, and when it is gone, it is as it had never been. It is a tragic or cruel. Only if you create a separate identity for each form, if you forget that its consciousness is a God essence expressing itself in the form, but you don't really know that until you realize your own God essence as a pure consciousness. If a fish is born in your aquarium and you call it John, write out a birth certificate telling him about his family history, and 2 minutes later he got eaten by another fish, that's too tragic. But it's only tragic because you projected as a separate self for it. There was none. You got a whole fraction of dynamic process of molecular dance and made a separate entity out of it. Consciousness takes on the deity's form until then reaches such complexity that it completely loses itself in them. In present day humans, consciousness is completely identified with its excuse. It only knows itself as a form and therefore lives in the fear of alienations of its physical and psychological form. This is egoic mind, and where considerable dysfunction set in. It's now look as if something had gone pretty wrong somewhere along the line of evolutions. But even this is the part of me that the divine came finally. The pressure of suffering created by the apparent dysfunction forced consciousness to disidentify it from an awakens it from its dream of form. It regains self-consciousness, but it is at a far deeper level than when it lost it. This process is explained by Jesus and in his parable of the lost son who leaves the father's home, squandered his wealth, became destitute and is then forced by his suffering to return home. When he does, his father loves him more than and before. The son state is the same as it was before. It's not the same. It has an added dimension of depth. The parable describes a journey from the unconscious perfection to the apparent misperfection and evil to conscious perfection. Can you now see the deepest and widest significance of becoming present at the waterer of the mind? And whenever you watch the mind, you withdraw consciousness from the mind forms, which then becomes what we call the water of witness. Consequently, the water, or the pure consciousness beyond form, becomes stronger and the mental formations become weaker. When we talk about watching the mind, we are personalizing an event that is study of the cosmic significance through consciousness is awaking out of the dream of identifications with the form and withdrawing form. This foreshadow but is already part of an event that is probably still in the distant future. As far as chronological time is concerned, the event is called the end of the world. When consciousness frees itself from its identification with physical and mental forms, becomes what we call a pure or enlightened consciousness of the presence. This has already happened in the future, and it seems destined to happen soon on a much larger scale, although there is no absolute guarantee that it will happen. Most humans are still in the grip of egoic mode of consciousness, identified with their mind and run by their mind. If they do not free themselves from their mind in the time, they will be destroyed by it. They will experience increasing confusion, conflict, violence, illness, despair, madness. Your sick mind has become like a sinking ship. If you don't get off, you will go down with it. The quality of music mind is the most dangerous, insane, and destructive entirely ever to inhabit this planet. What do you think will happen on the planet if the human consciousness remains unchanged? Already for the most humans, the only respite they find from their own mind is to occasionally revert to a level of consciousness below thought. Everyone does that every night during sleep. But this is also happens to some extent through sex, alcohol, and other drugs that suppress excessive mind activity. If it weren't for a dog, tranquilizers, antidepressant, as well as the illegal drugs which are all consumed in the vast quantities, the insanity of human mind would becomes even more directly obvious than it is already. I believe that if the divide of new drugs, a large part of populations would become a danger to themselves and others. Those this drug, of course, simply keeps his stock and dysfunction their widespread use only delays the breakdown of the whole mind structure and emerge of the higher consciousness, while the individual citizens may get some relief from their daily thoughts inflicted on them by their mind. They are prevented from gathering enough conscious presence to rise above thought and so find the true liberations, falling back to a level of consciousness below the mind, which is the breathtaking level of our distant ancestors and of animals and plants, is not an option for us. There is no way back. If the human race is to survive, it will go. It will have to go on the next stage. Consciousness is evolving throughout the universe in the billions of forms. So even if we didn't make it, this wouldn't matter on a cosmic scale. No gain in consciousness is ever lost, so it would simply express itself through some other form. But the very fact that I am speaking here and you are listening or reading this is clear sign that new consciousness is gaining a foothold on the planet. There is nothing personal in this. I am not teaching you. You are consciousness and you are listening to yourself. This is an external thing. The teacher and the thought together that create the teaching. In any case, the words in themselves are not important. They are not attitude. They only point to it. I speak from home presence, and as I speak, you may be able to join me in that state. Although every word that I use has a history, of course, and comes from the past as our languages. The words that I speak to you now are carriers of the high energy frequency of presence, quite apart from meaning that conveys as words. Silence is an even more potent carrier of presence. So when you read this or listen to me speak, be aware of the silence between and underneath the words. Be aware of the gaps to listen to the silence wherever you are. Is an easy and direct way of becoming present, even if there is noise, there is always some silence underneath and in between the sound. Listening to the silence immediately creates a stillness inside you. Only the stillness in you can perceive is silence outside, and what is stillness other than presence, consciousness freed from thought forms. Here is the living realization of what we have been talking about. Chris, the reality of your divine presence. Don't get attached to any word you can't substitute Chris for presence if that is more meaningful to you. Chris is your core essence as the self, as it is sometimes called in the, is the only difference between Chris and the presence is that Chris refers to your enduring in divinity, regardless of whether you are conscious of it or not. Whereas your presence means your acquired divinity or goddesses. Many misunderstandings and false beliefs about the Christ will clear if you realize that there is no past refusal in Christ to say that Christ was or will be the contradiction in Tom Jesus was. He was a man who lived 2000 years ago and realized divine presence, his true nature, and so he said, before Abraham was I am. He did not say I already existed before Abraham was born. And that would have meant that he was still within the dimension of the time and the form identity. The word I am used in the sentence that started in the past tense indicate a radical shift or discontinuity in the temporal dimension. It is a Zen-like statement of the great profundity. This attempt to convey directly, not through the discursive thought, the meaning of presence of the self-realization. He had held beyond the consciousness dimension governed by the time into the realm of timeless. The dimension of infinity had come into the world. Infinity, of course, doesn't mean endless time, but no time. Thus, the man has become the crest of Hegel for the pure consciousness and what the gods and revelations in the Bible. Did God say, I have always been, I always will be? Of course not. That would have given the reality to past and the future. God say, I am and that I am no time here is his presence. The second coming of Christ is the transformations of human consciousness. Is a shift from the time to presence, from thinking to the pure consciousness, not arrival of the same of man or omens. If the Christ were to return tomorrow in some externalized form, what could be he or she possibly say to you other than this? I'm truth, I'm a divine presence, I'm the eternal life. I'm within you, I'm here, I'm now. Never personalized Chris, don't make a Chris into the form of identity avatar defines more than enlightened master. The very few that are real are not special as persons without a false sense to upload, defend, and feed. They are more simple, more ordinary than the ordinary man or woman. So anyone with a strong ego would regard themselves as insignificant or more likely not see them at all. If you are drawn to an enlightened teacher, it is because there is already enough presence in you to recognize the presence in others. There were so many people who didn't recognize Jesus or the Buddha, as there are and always has been the many people who are drawn to false teachers. Egos are drawn to bigger egos. Darkness can not recognize light, only light can recognize light. So don't believe that the light is outside you or it can only came through one particular form. If only your master is an incarnation of God, then who are you? Any kind of exclusivity is identification with the form and identifications with forms means ego no matter how well discussed. Or use the master presence to reflect your own identity beyond name and the forms back to you and to become more intensely present yourself. You will soon realize that there is no mine or yours in the presence. Presence is one's. Group work can also be helpful for intensifying the light of your presence. A group of people coming together in this state of presence generate a collective in a field of great intensity. It not only raises the degree of presence of each member of the group, but also helps to free the collective human consciousness from its current state of mind dominance. This will make the state of presence increasingly or more accessible to individuals. However, unless at least one member of the group is already firmly established in it and thus can hold the insignificance of that state, the egoic mind can easily reassert itself and sabotage the group's in endeavors. All the group work is invaluable, it is not enough, and you must not come to depend on it, nor must you come to depend on the teacher or master except during the transaction period when you are learning the meaning and practice of presence. Okay, that was the chapter 5, the state of presence, and in the next content I'll bring the chapter 6, the inner body. Thanks so much for listening to the video.